Da tanto placer. I'm just so delighted to see each of you. How truly wonderful to have you here tonight. And so it is with great joy that I welcome you to the very first of our, what we are calling the HSP Exchange, where the goal is to engage one another, to gather together, to hear one another, and to begin to expand the presence and the reach of the HSP so that we can help to create a gathering place, a particular gathering place, a public square, so to speak, a Latinx public square, around issues that touch the lives and matter to the Latinx community of this country. So that's what this series is about. I know we are not only busy, but I also know that we are all zoomed out. Yet you have made time to be here tonight. So I say muchas gracias. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge your presence because each of you is important to the work of the Hispanic Summer Program. First, I want to acknowledge the presence of some of our board members. We have the chair of our board, Maida, if you could just kind of say hello. And we have Francisco Lozada, who's the vice chair of the board. We have Tim Van Meter, who's the treasurer. So we have them present. They're members of the executive committee, but we also have other members of the board who represent our sponsoring schools. And if you just raise your hand so that we can see you and you can say hello, it's the sponsoring schools who have been important to the work of the HSP, and we're so glad that you're here. I also want to acknowledge the presence of our alums. This feels like a big HSP session, doesn't it? Familiar faces, people we know, we've had classes with, we've had lunch with, some of you even played football. If you were there at the Chicago, remember we played, well, I didn't play anything, I just watched, but you guys played football. We had just a wonderful time. So all of the alums who are here, everybody, all the alums, it's good to see you. Levanten las manos en el nombre de Cristo. Say hello, everybody. Good to see you. We also want to acknowledge the presence of those of you who are presidents and deans of our sponsoring schools. Wonderful to have you here. Scott Woodward in particular is here, the president of Oblate. Scott has been a supporter of the HSP, and we're so delighted that you are here, and so many others, and all of you who are new to the HSP. Perhaps you're going to be coming to the session this year for the first time, or you've heard about the event and you wanted to join us. Well, I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome. All right? Feel at home. Está en su casa. You're amongst a community of hope, a community that lives in hope, and a community that believes. Our staff you've met, Jorge, is the assistant for strategic something or the other, so I want to welcome him, but he's a great person to work with. And we have our administrator, who is just wonderful, Elizabeth Niang. You hear me write about her all the time, telling you all the things she's going to do, and she does them all. So she's here as well. So we're the team behind the HSP. So, esta noche, here we are, from all places around the nation, and from a myriad of communities, we have gathered here tonight, right in the middle of Holy Week, right during the celebration of Passover, when both Christian and Jew remember. To remember is something that we do in community. And so tonight it seems so appropriate that during this holy season, we have a truly wonderful speaker, Dr. Cláudio Carvalhaes, who gathers us this evening and will help us to remember. Dr. Carvalhaes is Associate Professor of Worship and is a native of Brazil, an author of numerous books and articles, a tremendous liturgical leader, a wonderful teacher, and what matters most, he is just a wonderful and genuine human being, and I'm glad to count him as a friend. So, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker tonight, Dr. Cláudio Carvalhaes. Cláudio, bienvenido.
Gracias, Professor Machado. I'm so glad to be here, so happy. And glad because Professor Machado is one of the most precious people to me. I think Jorge is right when he said that she's the historian. Anywhere she is, she's the historian. Everybody else have to get a little better. But she is one of the most important leaders of the Latinx theological community. And not only that, she is also one of the most important voices of the theological world today. And so it is such an honor to be with her anywhere. And without knowing, remember I was doing my PhD at Union, and in one conference that she was there was changed completely. And that day is the day that I will never forget. And so since that day, I always wanted to be near her, or read what she writes, or hear what she speaks. And everything that she asks me, I will do. If she invites me to play hopscotch, I will do. If she tells me that I will need to go to the borders tomorrow, I will. Because it's always good to be with her and so much to learn. And to be with her and to be with the HSP. HSP, it matters to me in a great deal because it has become my church, my community, one of the most important places that I belong. Every year, I look forward to be a part of it. And at that place, there's always challenges, and I'm always feel fully blessed. I can be fully myself when we are together. And every year we have different and incredible experiences. And every year is different. There's only one thing that stays the same every year. It's my disastrous joke of not understanding the word hot. That every time I start to want to talk about that joke, Professor Machado leaves the room. But one day I will tell you. But I don't see any other program for the Latinx community that would be more important to participate than the Hispanic Summer Program. And I'm delighted to be invited for the beginning of this new program that HSP is starting, and it will continue and it will grow for sure. And I'm here because of you who are here, and be part of you all, and see you and feel this gathering, this blessing of being together. This is what is sustaining us, right? La comunidad, la familia is always what holds us standing, holds us together. So let me then start, and I'm gonna have a little bit of a talk, and then I'll give you some questions for discussion. And so in this brief time, what I want us to do is to pause and think about the week that we are living in now. There's a reason why we are meeting this week, and it has to be with this heightened sense of spirituality during this week for any Christian. Be you a Christian who celebrate all the liturgical Triduum, or the 7 last words of Jesus, or only Easter Sunday, this week is filled for Christianity with emotions, troubles, anxiety, sadness, desperation, silence, and also unimaginable joy. And religions have this power of giving us a frame within which we live and from which we live. It helps organizes our time and space in the world. It not only gives us lenses into the world, but shapes our worlds fully. For instance, Christmas and Easter are the main liturgical seasons where we celebrate the birth, the death, and resurrection of Jesus. Our cosmologies, our understanding of the world are grounded in these movements and everything in between. For Christians, our cosmologies have specific symbols and narratives and gestures and colors and songs and food and moves and modes of living and ways of creating and recreating worlds in our own world. At the heart of Christianity, there is life and death. Life and death not only as the very beginning and the very end of life, but rather a space that in between many births and rebirths and deaths and resurrections happen all along the way. As the hymn that I love says, pues si vivimos, para él vivimos, y si morimos, para él morimos. Let it be to live or to die, we belong to God. Or like the song from Mercedes Sosa that says, so many times they kill me, so many times I died, and yet I kept on going and kept on singing. So the question for us today is, how can we understand this structure of life and death during this heightened liturgical and spiritual time? How can we understand life and death at this moment? Well, if we take a hint from Latin American liberation theologians and Hispanic theologies, we must look around at our surroundings, at our communities, and we must start by looking at our people and what is happening around us so we can learn from that reality what to say about God, how to think and feel and pray and sing during this time. And what do we see this week? Well, I think we see the same thing that we've been seeing throughout this year. COVID-19. We see the world being infected by a virus that we had no idea it could devastate us so badly. COVID has affected the world in so many ways that we are still to grapple with its effects. And yet, we have seen the most fundamental ways in which this virus has hit us hard and has hit us, especially the impoverished. While the rich is becoming richer, poverty has grown exponentially, loss of jobs skyrocketed, hunger is hitting way more people than we couldn't imagine. While we feel we are starting now in US to pass the pandemic because of the vaccine, this is not the same around the world. It is said that 85 countries around the world don't have money to access the vaccines. 85 countries. And unless the whole world is vaccinated, we will still have to wrestle with this endemic situation. The pandemic has been used by several governments as tools for massive killing. In my country, Brazil, is when the government is actually using this for people to die. Just yesterday, 3,500 people, more than 3,500 people died. They're going more into lockdowns now. It is killing the poor. And this is what is called, my friends, necropolitics, the politics of death. There's an estimate of 231 million people only in Latin America that is predicted to be already living in poverty right now due to COVID. Also, Latinx in the United States face disproportional health and economic impacts from COVID-19, as we all know. Latinx and the poor are all doing and working in essential services, being exposed to the virus in so many ways, making death of COVID in Latinx communities go up to 18.6%. Latinx vaccinated for COVID-19 are at a far lower rate than white people. Wow, incredible. Well, that doesn't count in some parts of California, around of plantations where our people work, and the government there decided to give priority to the plantation workers. They don't give them documents, but they give them vaccine. And they do that, otherwise we won't be able to eat. But this is not happening in the Latinx communities only, but in all of the minority communities. Where it comes to poverty, COVID is hitting hard. Black communities, Asian communities, white trash communities, indigenous communities, queer communities, disabled communities, all of them are the most affected. Well, if you are a part of a white middle-class church, you are indeed seeing death because this is everywhere, but perhaps you might not be seeing the utter disasters of COVID in vulnerable communities the way it is now. Mothers dying and leaving their children behind. Fathers dying on the line of hospitals without beds, dying suffocated. Entire families going hungry. So if we are, my friends, to understand our time from the frame of the Holy Week, starting on Palm Sunday and ending on Easter Sunday, we have to read it from the frame of this virus. And so we can say this: the rich are riding the donkey and are glorified by their followers, while the poor are all heading straight to Golgotha. The worlds of the poor are now living between Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The worlds of the poor are like living on Thursdays with rumors of death all the time. The worlds of the poor are like praying in the Gethsemane of our pueblos when the poor prays, Father, remove this cup from me. The worlds of the poor are like living in a big and constant Holy Friday. All we have is death, crucifixion, blood, bodies lying on hospitals without a place to be buried. COVID is killing people all around, and the world is becoming a huge Golgotha. The worlds of the poor are like living on endless Saturdays without hearing the voice of the women bringing good news. So do you know what it means to go through Thursday and Friday today if you are poor? Try to imagine yourself being a parent and your child being taken away from you. Perhaps your precious child is inside of a cage somewhere around the borders. Or perhaps your child has already been adopted by a family in the United States. This is what it means to go through Thursdays and Fridays today if you are an immigrant. Wouldn't you go mad? Golgotha. Where is the resurrection, my friends? Is there resurrection for Latinx communities? And I would say absolutely. Resurrection is always at the heart of our communities. Perhaps not in many concrete ways, but it is there, and it is lived concretely, but in some ways it's more as a feel and a hope for resurrection, and that is everywhere. We might not see resurrection, but the hope for resurrection is everywhere. If this is good or not, I don't know. What do I say that? Because resurrection means one thing for some communities, my friend, and resurrection means something else for other communities. We cannot understand resurrection as a given to all. Resurrection is one thing for the white community and the rich, and resurrection is something very different for communities of color and the poor. Don't associate your class securities with the spiritual assurance of resurrection. It is one thing to celebrate resurrection when you have health insurance, but it is another way, very different, to celebrate resurrection if you don't have health insurance. It is one thing to celebrate resurrection when you have the choice to stay or to go, but it's another very different thing to celebrate resurrection when you have to become an immigrant and move to survive. Because if you're not an immigrant, you might go and come back. If you're an immigrant, you might end up in the desert of Holy Friday. Or you might end up drowned in the Rio Grande River with your precious daughter inside of your t-shirt. It is one thing to celebrate resurrection when your kids are near and safe. It is another very different thing to celebrate resurrection when your kids are in cages and taken away from you. Or if they're asking you for food because they are hungry. And let me add another twist, my friends, to this understanding of the Holy Week. Besides the disasters of being poor during this time, we must also include within the communities of the wretched of the earth, to quote Fanon, we have to include the wretched earth. Like the poor, the earth is dying. Like the poor, the earth is also living between Thursday and Friday. Capitalism, development, progress, good economy are all rumors of death. Extractivism, pulling everything from the soil, deforesting, mountaintop removal, overfishing, turning the Amazon forest into a big pasture to fulfill our desire for meat. All of these things are like Golgotha to the earth. The earth is becoming an immense Golgotha. But why the earth? If we think about COVID in our time, there's a reason why we have COVID everywhere. COVID didn't just appear because it wanted to show up. COVID came and appeared because we are not living in the ways that we should have, with limits. COVID is more than a virus from China. COVID is a virus that tells us who we are and how we live. We place ourselves above everything on the earth. We think that we can own everything and are entitled to everything. We have learned that we don't have limits, and other creatures beside humans are just there for fun and for our appetite. We devour everything on earth for things. Our disconnection from the earth and our estrangement from all forms of other than human lives is such that we feel that nature is out there simply for our human enjoyment. Nature is there to give us all we want, and we have to master everything since we're all addicted to mastery. You have to master everything. This is the education of the white folks that we have taken, and now we have to master other people. We have to master our field. We have to master over mountains, soils, oceans, animals, and all forms of life. But COVID is showing us that if we don't have a limit, the earth will put a limit to us. The earth is coming back with a revenge. And if we don't change, my friends, there's not going to be any resurrection. So I'll finish with two questions. First, what is it that we need to compose a new cosmology of our Holy Week? For instance, in what we have now, in the narratives that we have now, we have a donkey, palms, the Garden of Gethsemane, government necropolitics, torture people like Jesus, crosses, waiting together like the disciples, resurrection, and so on. But what else do we need throughout Holy Week if we are to consider COVID? And the wretched of the earth, and the earth, and the wretched earth. What COVID is challenging us to make us pay attention to the earth and all its inhabitants. How can we pay attention to other than humans too, along with the humans? How do we connect the crabs, the mountains, the birds, the rivers, the plants, the forests? How can these people compose the cosmology of our Holy Week? Second thing, if the resurrection of Jesus is an assurance, the resurrection of the poor isn't. If the resurrection of Jesus is indeed a celebration, the resurrection of the earth isn't perhaps a possibility. So, and that's what I'm challenging you. And you can attack me afterwards and say all your mean things afterwards, but I'm saying I don't take resurrection for granted. It can be taken for granted in our faith. But if our faith has to do with a real material life, how is it that we can consider resurrection in a world where the poor and the earth are being put on the crosses every day? So the question is, what it is that we need now in our spiritualities, if we are to see resurrection coming to our communities, to the poor, to the earth. What narratives do we need? What symbols do we need? What prayers do we need to pray? What songs do we need to sing? The earth is already working on its way to resurrection everywhere. The earth is creating and recreating life in endless processes of symbiosis that regenerate and resurrect all the time. Mycelium, fungi, moss, bacteria are all regenerative forces within the earth ecosystem who are already working for our resurrection. And our work can be done together with the earth. If we work in a sense of of a communal relationality, of gifts, of mutual gifts and honoring each other, then something can happen. So resurrection is at hand, my friends. If we only believe that, by the grace of God, we can be changed and change how we live. And then the unimaginable joy of resurrection will be everywhere. But if we don't change, we might end up at Golgotha without Sunday. I have spoken too much. I'll leave it up to you for discussion. Thank you so much, very much. Me and my crab friend, thank you.